It's Wednesday, the 6th of April. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. And what the heck happened to Air France Flight 11 on its approach to runway 26 left at Paris yesterday, 5 April? Let's turn first to Simon Radecki here at the Aviation Herald. Incident: France Boeing 777-300 at Paris on 5 April 2022. Airplane did not respond to commands. An Air France Boeing 777-300 performing flight as Air France 11 from New York to Charles de Gaulle, France, was on final approach to Paris's runway 26 left, established on the localizer and cleared to land, descending through 1,500 feet when the crew was heard on tower frequency, audibly in distress. Alarm sounds in the background. More on that in a minute. We'll hear all that. One of the pilots calling, "Stop, stop, stop it." Tower instructed the crew to stop the approach at 1,500 feet. When the aircraft descended through 1,200 feet, significantly having veered to the left off of the localizer, the autopilot disconnect wailer can finally be heard on the radio transmission. The crew manages to go around from about 1,150 feet. While climbing out and leveling off at 4,000 feet, the crew reported that they had problems with the aircraft not following commands. The crew requested runway 27 right under radar vectoring, positioned for an approach to 27 right, and landed without further incident. According to ADS-B data transmitted by the aircraft, they were at 1,725 feet MSL, mean sea level, about 4.17 nautical miles before the runway threshold. Glide slope intercept is at 1,768 feet MSL. The aircraft subsequently began to deviate to the left, so that's about where the deviation began. Today, on April 6, 2022, the French BEA reported they rated the occurrence as a serious incident and opened an investigation. The aircraft suffered a flight control instability, control stiffness, and trajectory oscillations. CVR and FDR data have been downloaded on April 5th and are being analyzed. The BEA, Bureau of Inquiries, will get to the bottom of this really quick because they've got all the data. Let's take a look at the weather at the time of the incident. Let's see, shown in the dark black here. Winds are 230 at 8 or 9 knots, so it's down the runway at 8 or 9 knots. The visibility is 3,000 meters, about 2.5 miles visibility. Light rain and mist broken at 300 feet above the ground, so that constitutes an overcast at just 300 feet. Temperature dew point spread 9 degrees Celsius temperature, 8 degrees dew point. So anytime that temperature dew point is less than 2 degrees, you're going to see that fog. And temporarily broken at just 200 feet. So the conditions were definitely instrument conditions. This crew was flying the ILS approach. The minimums here are legal for a Category 1 instrument approach. We don't know if the crew had set up for Category 1, 2, or 3 auto land, but they were definitely not in visual conditions. Take a look at this map graphic from Google Earth. Coming in on the localizer, 1,900 feet, descending on the glide path, 1,900 feet, 1,600 feet, 1,200 feet, and right about in here they get the left deviation and then begin a missed approach and climb on up 2,100, 2,200, 2,500 feet and on back up eventually to 4,000 feet for an uneventful landing. Now going to the Flight Radar 24 data, they show the entire flight from New York to Paris, and here they come into Paris. Looks like a right base entry for a nice long localizer final with the autopilot on, and then the deviations begin right about here for the 26 left runway. They get the go around, do a radar box pattern back around and land on the north side of the runway and then taxi back to their gate. Correction, the right side of the airport on runway 27 right. There's 4 runways here at Charles de Gaulle Airport. We'll look at that in a minute. And then taxi back to the gate. Now let's look at the speed and altitude graph. If you hit this button here, you'll get this information. They got the entire flight here, and we want to focus on this latter part. So if you do a left mouse click and highlight, you can zoom in to that section of the data, and right in here is what we're interested in. So first, let's go back and look at the second approach and landing, the uneventful approach and landing. And it looks like they're using an approach speed at this weight of about Well, the resulting ground speed is about 130 knots with that 8 or 10 knot headwind or so. About 130 knot ground speed for the normal approach and landing. And this looks like a normal descent and glide path on in. That's for their final landing on to the runway to the north, 27 right. Here they are setting up for the initial approach to 26 left. A little bit hot, slowing it down, and then getting into approach speed. And then right in here, they initiate a go-around, but they still continue to descend right down to about 1,150 feet. Looks like they're maintaining approach speed all right. Then they hit the go-around, and right there's a brief indication of a very low ground speed of 112 knots on the go-around. They're already climbing out, so the nose is pitching up quite a bit, and there's a little bit of a low speed indication right in there. But they recover nicely. Autopilot's back on. You can tell the autopilot's on just by how smooth this data is. And back around for the radar pattern. So what happened right in here? So as we replay the first approach, looking down here at these numbers, 8 to 900 feet per minute, descending on the glide path, on approach speed, 125 or so knots, ground speed, and then right away, boom, as soon as they get that left deviation, it looks like they are climbing away from the ground, which is the right thing to do. Right? 0, and boom, they're out of there. And that starts with a pretty good initial rate of climb. As soon as you hit those toga buttons, the go-around buttons on the 777, you're going to climb. Now, with permission from Melanie at Air Live, we're going to replay this video where they've captured the audio of this exchange.
Bonjour Air France 011 établi LS 26 gauche.
A thing about the language. Yeah, English is the standard language for aviation around the world, but when you are in your home country, most folks speak their home language when they're in their home country. So Air France is going to do all their communications in French when they're back home. Of course, when they come over to the States or anywhere else in the rest of the world, they're all speaking in English. Whenever we go to France, we're going to be speaking in English as U.S. crew members.
Air France 011, bonjour, autorisé atterrissage 26 gauche, 230 degrés 8 nœuds.
Autorisé, confirmé autorisé atterrissage. Pour Air France 011, confirmé atterrissage, autorisé atterrissage 26 gauche.
Je confirme Air France 011, 230 degrés 8 nœuds.
Merci. Oui. Stop, stop.
Air France 011.
Je vous rappelle.
Air France Hotel Whisky, stoppez la montée 1500 pieds immédiatement. Air France Hotel Whisky. Oui, on stoppe 1500 pieds.
Stop. Ok, France 011, on a remis les gaz, mais 4000 pieds, on va les maintenir, on vous rappelle.
Pas de soucis 011, maintenez 4000 pieds, le QNH est à 1013, le départ en dessous est stoppé, vous me rappelez quand vous pouvez.
Air France 011, on a remis les gaz, donc un problème de commande de vol, l'avion fait à peu près n'importe quoi, donc on est prêt à se porter en finale avec un guidage radar, le temps de gérer un peu la situation, si vous pouvez me donner une très longue vente arrière.
Tailwind, they mean downwind. A little lost in translation there. Couple things. All right, so first off, what are we hearing? We're hearing the crew fighting with the aircraft, and in their effort to fight with the aircraft, they've managed to grab the transmit button on the radio. The switch is located right behind your yoke there, And so that's why you can hear them fighting with the aircraft. We also hear two bells, warnings, or sirens. The first one we hear is the master warning, the red master warning on the Boeing 777. The second one, I believe, is the autopilot disconnect warning. Now, this will all have to be verified because these warning sounds can mean many different things. They're associated normally with an ICAS message, so from inside the cockpit, you can tell exactly what's going on, what warning you are receiving. And also, too, on these red warnings, as opposed to cautions, which are in yellow and have a completely different sound, on these warnings, you can silence the warning, but on some warnings that are so critical, the warning siren will not go away until you fix the situation. So one of the possibilities is that if you do your go-around incorrectly, if you don't go through the proper litany of your go-around, you may end up raising the gear before you get the flaps to 20, which will set off this master warning, and it will not go out until which time that you fix that situation. The standard litany, we'll go over it here on the paper tiger trainer for the Boeing 777, and I'll show you how a go-around is supposed to go. The way it's supposed to work on a standard go-around on the 777 is you say toga, go-around toga, hit the toga switches, either one of these two switches right here just forward of the throttles. With the autopilot engaged, auto throttles engaged, that'll engage the go-around mode. Flaps 20, call for flaps 20. The pilot not flying will retract the flaps to 20. Positive rate, make sure you're climbing away from the ground. Call for the gear up and set missed approach altitude. Make sure you got the missed approach altitude set in the mode control panel, which you should have already had set before while on your approach after the final approach fix. So go around, flaps 20, positive rate, gear up, set missed approach. Stop. Okay, and that is the master warning that you're hearing in the background. If you still have the autopilot on and you start fighting the controls are going to be very, very heavy. You can override the autopilot without properly disconnecting it, but it's very, very heavy on the controls.
Air France 0.
Je vous rappelle.
Air France Hotel Whisky, stoppez la montée 1500 pieds immédiatement. Air France Hotel Whisky.
Whoop, 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 whoop. I believe that is going to be your autopilot disconnect warning siren. So it sounds like initially they got the master warning first and then disconnected the autopilot sometime later. So was the struggle with the aircraft just simply struggling with the autopilot? But why did the aircraft veer to the left in the first place?
Oui, on stop 400 pieds.
He's beginning to breathe again. He's getting it back under control, and he's either hand flying it back into the direction that he wants to, and or he's getting the autopilot reconnected back up for a standard go-around. Now, this crew is flying a standard ILS instrument landing system approach. An ILS comprises of two antennas, a glide slope antenna and a localizer antenna, giving you two different bits of information. The glide slope antenna, located to the right or to the side of the runway, gives you your vertical guidance, that 3 degrees I was talking about, on into the runway, this plane here. The localizer antenna gives you your left and right guidance into the runway, and it's an antenna located well off of the far end of the runway and produces this signal here. In the aircraft, the raw data of this signal appears here. Here's your localizer raw data, the diamond on the bottom here, and here's your glide slope raw data, the diamond here on the right. You follow this raw data with the flight directors, the two pretty pink lines here. You keep those centered up and you're going to follow the localizer glide slope on down. If in the event either of these begins deviating very far, you're going to need to either if you're on a visual approach, you could click off the autopilot and continue to hand flight because you got the runway in sight and just go ahead and land the aircraft. But on an instrument approach, if these begin deviating much, and if you're on a Category 3 instrument approach, if they deviate at all, as soon as they begin deviating, you just call the go around and take it around. Here on runway 26 left at Charles de Gaulle, the glide slope antenna is located right here off to the side of the runway. The glide slope antenna also has these glide slope hold short lines. Here's your standard hold short line right here. And in the event that the weather is bad, less than, 802, they need to utilize these ILS hold short lines indicated here, the yellow ladders, so that you keep clear of the glide slope antenna. But that's for the glide slope. What we had here was a lateral deviation. The localizer antenna is located way down here. Where is it? Here it is. Way down here off the end of the runway. This localizer antenna can also get blocked by aircraft that are either on the runway or rolling out from ahead of you as you're coming into land. It's fairly rare, but these localizer antennas can get interfered with by even something like a truck, a vehicle, or a lawnmower moving in front of these localizer antennas. Can briefly make that localizer signal wiggle on you. And with the fully coupled autopilot hooked up to that approach, it'll follow that signal. The aircraft will follow that signal. Now, what about the possibility of 5G interference? 5G, remember, primarily affects your radio altimeter. This was a lateral deviation problem. It appears to not have been a vertical deviation problem, though the crew did descend a bit on their initial attempt to get out of there, or they were continuing to descend. So it'll be up to investigators to determine, did 5G possibly have anything to do with this? We don't know. Remember, too, on our discussion about 5G interference, Europe versus here in the States, 5G was introduced earlier in Europe. They use a lower signal strength to begin with over in Europe. They have already tilted their antennas down at a different angle than here in the States, and they also managed to negotiate clear space area around the landing zones of these major airports in Europe, something we had to fight tooth and nail for to come to an agreement here in the States. So the Bureau of Inquiries in France will be able to quickly get this all sorted out because they've got all the data. They'll be able to find out exactly what were those warnings for, exactly what instrument approach was the aircraft set up for, was it set up correctly for the correct approach for the correct runway, and why was it such a struggle for this crew to perform the go-around in this situation. Thanks so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.
Gainage 7013, le départ en dessous est stoppé. Vous me rappelez quand vous pouvez.
Et à France 011, on a remis des gaz, donc un problème de commande de vol. L'avion a fait à peu près n'importe quoi, donc on est prêt à se porter en finale avec un guidage radar. Le temps de gérer un petit peu la situation, si vous pouvez me donner une très longue vente arrière.
So what did he say about the airplane?
So they were fighting with the controls, and he said suddenly the airplane did something like out of control, or like it just started doing random stuff.
Did it sound like he knew?
Then it sounded like he didn't know what it did, and then after that he says, "So give us a chance to get this thing under control, and figure it out."
Huh.
Sounds like they don't know what happened.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a
Sounds
casual way of describing
Very
things, you would say?
casual. Yeah, very casual.
Interesting.
Yeah, when you say l'avion a fait à peu près n'importe quoi, it sounds like it's it's like he's saying it's misbehaving. Like when a child misbehaves or doesn't do something right, you say tu fais n'importe quoi. You're doing, what the heck are you doing? Airplane, what the heck are you doing? Something like that, basically.
That's Jenny. She's been working with the French language since you were 10 years old,
Many years.
right?
I started learning it when I was 10, and I lived in France in the late 90s and the early 2000s for about 5 years.
Very good. Thanks, Jenny.